progress iteratively and with feedback. This is our third guiding principle. Now, what this tells us is that if we work in a time box, iterative manner, getting feedback loops embedded into this process, it's going to allow us to have greater flexibility, much faster responses to our current customer and business needs, as well as the ability to discover and respond to our failures earlier and improve our overall quality. This is all about doing things in an agile method of working. When we go into project management, there's two basic ways we can build something. We can do it in a waterfall method, which is more like a standard Prince2 methodology, or we can do it in an agile way of working, which is more like a Prince2 agile methodology. Now, with a waterfall, I want to figure out the entire thing I need, break it down into smaller chunks, and then build each of those chunks towards that final vision. But nobody gets to use the thing until it's all done. For example, if I was going to build a house for you, that's the way I would do it. I would figure out where the house is going to go. We would say, okay, there are lots of different things that need to happen before I can give you that house and before you can move in. I need to make sure the basement has been poured. I need to make sure the walls have been put up. The electrical has been installed. The plumbing has been installed. The drywall, the painting, all the fixtures. Everything has to be ready, and then you can move in. So it might take me 12 months or 18 months before the house is ready to be delivered to you. Now, on the other hand, if I did things in an agile way of working, maybe I would be able to make one room of the house first, and you can move in and live in that room. And then we can start building the rest of the house around you. That would be the way we can do one room at a time and keep giving you one room, then two rooms, then three rooms, then four rooms, and eventually you'll have the whole house. That doesn't work very well in a house, but in services and IT, you can do that oftentimes. So when you're building a service in IT, you want to think about that and how you can progress iteratively with feedback. This means we're going to organize the work into smaller, more manageable sections. If I'm going to make an iPhone app, for instance, it may have just one function when I release it. And then I'll add the second function, and then the third function. I can do this sequentially or simultaneously. I can make these in manageable, smaller chunks of code, and then as I put something out, I can get feedback from my audience that, hey, we don't like this, we want more of this. And that gives me some tangible results to figure out, am I hitting the bullseye, or do I need to pivot to something else? Also, it's better because I get timely feedback. If I put out one feature, it may have only taken me a month or two to build. And you could tell me, you know, I really don't like that feature because it needs this other thing. Whereas if I waited an entire year to deliver something that had 20 features, you then look at it and go, no, don't like it, and we have another year's worth of work. So the idea here is to use smaller pieces and build upon them for future improvements. Now, this feedback loop is critical inside of this because as I'm delivering these small modular chunks, I'm getting feedback from my end users or from my stakeholders. And this feedback loop is a situation where part of this output is now activity that's going to be used for a new input. So as I gave you a piece of software, you can say, I like the software, but the fact that it has a blue icon is bad. I want it to have a red icon. That now becomes input that goes back into the second version that is now going to come out with a red icon. A good example of this is feedback surveys that you get from customer support. If I'm running a help desk or a service desk, after I'm done with the call, I'm going to get feedback from the user I helped that says, were you satisfied or not? And if not, why not? I can then use that to build into the process other things that are going to help improve those scores. Now, because we're doing things in iterative manner and we're doing things in these smaller chunks and getting that feedback, we're going to be able to have these initiatives and all the components that make it up broken down into these smaller chunks. And these are going to be continually reevaluated to reflect changes in our circumstances. Maybe the requirements are going to change. Maybe the marketplace has shifted. If you went back 5 or 10 years, the deal of a day sites like Groupon were huge. Everyone was making them. And so everybody would just put them out really quick and see what happened. But if you tried to make a deal of the day site today, you're probably not going to do very well with it. So instead, if you put that out and saw there was no marketplace intake of it, nobody wanted that service, you could say, what out of this can I use and make into my next service? Now, because we're trying to progress iteratively, we're going to have all of these things broken down into smaller chunks of code like we've talked about. So these might be smaller systems or processes or services. Now, we're going to take our initiative and break it down into these different components. And throughout each of these iterations, as we're building them, we're going to be getting feedback. Now, as we get that feedback, we're going to continually reevaluate what we've put out. And based on that feedback, we're going to reflect changes into our next version of the products. Now, as we're seeking out all that feedback, we need to make sure we don't just collect it and do nothing with it. we actually want to use that feedback. We want to use it before, during, and after building each of these iterations of the service. And so as we keep using these feedback loops between all of these participants, it helps us understand where the work is coming from, where the outputs from the service are going, and how it affects the ultimate consumer and their affected outcomes. By understanding all of that, we're getting more feedback, which allows us to build better. This is all about doing things in an agile way because it's quicker to market. So some of the key takeaways I want you to have from this lesson on progressing iteratively and with feedback is that as you're going through, you're going to do things by comprehending the whole, but doing small pieces towards that end goal. So if I think about this again like a house, I need to think about what the whole house will look like, but right now I'm focused on building one room, right? And that would be the way that we can build one room and then the second room and then the third room. If you do that in the software or a service realm, we're building these components, putting them together to give us the complete service. When we think about this also, remember that your ecosystem is constantly changing, so feedback becomes essential. As I'm putting out something to the market, I may find out from my consumers they don't care about that feature. They don't care about that service, and so we need to pivot and do something different. The other thing is, I want you to remember that fast does not mean incomplete. Even though I'm only giving you one chunk or one feature, that feature should be complete. And it can do the whole function that it needs to in and of itself. But then the next iteration might be able to add a second feature or a third feature. That doesn't mean that with the one feature it was incomplete. It was a complete and ready product for version 1. And now version 2 has 2 functions and version 3 has 3 functions. And you keep adding as you go. Remember, the whole concept here is that we can get things out to market faster, we can get feedback, and then incorporate that into our future versions.